Welcome to the Develop Yourself podcast, where we teach you everything you need to land your first job as a software developer by learning to develop yourself, your skills, your network, and more. I'm Brian, your host. So I'm a bit obsessed with the tech interview, and a few years ago, I spent over $10,000 learning how to interview really, really well. Am I a better interviewee because of it? Yeah, objectively so. I made it to a few top companies, increased my salary. It was a great move. It was a great investment. I don't regret it. I would do it again. I may have to do it again because now I'm an engineering manager. And even though I own Parsity, I still like what I do. And I'm sure I'll be on the job hunt at some point, and I want to make sure I can actually nail interviews. It's not all a game of chance and luck. You should really develop that skill. Now, junior developer interviews are what I want to talk about because I've been helping recently some students at Parsity with their interview preparation. I've been talking about some of the common pitfalls. And even a dude I met on Instagram reached out to me and said, "Hey, I would love to do a mock interview with you." And I said, "Dude, yeah, I'd love to." So we recorded it. It's in the show notes here. You can check it out. It is not the most entertaining, but it's going to give you a very representative view of what your interview could look like as a junior developer. Now, I'm not telling you this based on some theory or what I've read. I've worked with hundreds of people. I've spoken with literally 500 developers, and I have a show about that you can also check out. It's kind of interesting. Speaking with all these people gave me a pretty solid view of like what we're all kind of going through. And it gave me a very interesting peek into the junior developer interview. I made some assumptions that I was completely wrong about, and I bet you might be too. You probably think your junior developer interview, meaning like the first company that you interview with as a person trying to get into software, is going to revolve around data structures and algorithms. Showing off a portfolio, maybe talking about your capstone project. Wrong, and wrong again. I really thought data structures and algorithms were much more prevalent than they are. I would say way less than half. I'd say maybe around a quarter of the people I've spoken to have data structure and algorithm style interviews where they're doing things like, here, given, a tree with this many nodes, how would you traverse it? And tell me the big O notation. And that probably sounds like a big tech word salad to you right now, perhaps. Maybe you don't know that kind of stuff yet. That's okay. I would say you want to know that stuff, the basics of it. We're not going to go over that today, but I definitely have resources. You should always check out parsity.io. Check out the resources we got there. I love giving away free stuff, and sometimes people become customers, so it's a win-win. If you don't want to become a customer, just take the free stuff. All good, right? So your junior developer interview, if it's anything like the hundreds of people I've spoken to, it's going to go a little something like this. By the way, I also did quite a lot of junior developer interviews, a year or two ago. I was interviewing a lot of people for our team. We ended up hiring 2 junior developers, excellent candidates, great people to work with. And their interview is kind of like the one I'm going to talk to you about today. So what you're going to do first is get a recruiter calling you up. The recruiter is going to basically make sure you're not crazy. The recruiter, by the way, is often not technical. And by often, I mean almost never technical, meaning they don't write code. So remember your audience when you're talking to the person. They're trying to determine, is this person a safe bet for me to move on to the hiring manager or the engineering manager, a more technical person? So your first barrier to entry is a non-technical person, which means that you need to craft a story that's going to make sense to a non-technical person. They're going to say, "Hey, tell me a little bit about yourself. What brings you to this company?" You should have looked up the company, understood what they do, why you want to work there, a little bit about their tech stack. Can you parrot some of those things back to the recruiter on the call to make it sound like you're a safe bet? Do you want to tell them that you just graduated a boot camp and your only experience is a capstone project? Maybe not. Ultimately, this call is to make sure, 1, you're not crazy, 2, you don't have some wild salary expectations, and 3, that you know just enough of the tech stack to make sense. If it's a Java shop and you know JavaScript, which is a running joke in software, they say, "Oh, we see you know JavaScript. This is a Java job, so we figured it would be the same, right?" And you're like, "Well, no." So, sometimes that happens and it sucks. But it's better to be truthful and not waste time than to try to lie. So they should hopefully know a little bit about you before you get on the call and say, "Hey, this is a React, JavaScript, TypeScript, Node.js workshop. Are these skills that you have, and what's your confidence or competence in these?" And they're asking a really arbitrary, subjective question. So you just generally want to say, "Oh yeah, I feel really confident in all those areas," because the actual tech interview is going to be where they actually determine this. Remember, the recruiter, again, not technical, You want to just say, hey, yeah, sure, I feel great about all these technology. Imagine if you said, I feel like about, I don't know, 5. If I said I feel like a 2 out of 10 in JavaScript, do you think they want to move forward with me? A person that doesn't know anything about JavaScript? I might say, even after 10 years of using it, I might say, you know what? I feel like about, 6 or 7 right now. I don't know, arbitrary. I know that there's a lot that I could get better at. So maybe to me, I'm a 6 or a 7, even at this stage. They might say, ooh, not good enough. See ya, bucko. So aim high. Tell them I feel confident. This is the tech stack I'm using. Here's what I've built. I am a software developer. So you have to ask, oh, so what are you currently doing? Say, I'm a freelance web developer doing X, Y, and Z. And if you're not a quote unquote freelance web developer, that's a whole other story. But I think you should be. I think you should be doing work for people local businesses, anybody that will let you work for free. By the way, at Parsity, that's exactly what we're putting our efforts into right now. We are looking for ways to get students that hands-on experience. We've done a few internships so far, and we're doing more of them because they, one, boost student confidence. 2, it allows you to put a badge on your LinkedIn that says, hey, I'm actually doing something for a company, writing code like a software developer. I am a software developer. I'm developing software. So really important. If you can do that, excellent. If you're already in this stage, it's okay. Say, I'm working on this project right now. This is a small startup. It depends on what you feel comfortable saying at the end of the day, right? So if you don't feel comfortable saying something, then make it true. What do you want to say? Make that reality, right? If you want to say I'm a freelance developer and you don't feel like you can, make that thing true, right? So after you get past this recruiter call, they say, okay, great, Charlie, Sarah, we think you're not crazy and we think you know the bare minimum, right? I'm going to pass you along. Now it's time for the tech interview. Here's where most people make a mistake. And I spoke to a person recently about this. They said, hey, I'm going for this interview. What should I be studying? And I said, well, did you ask them? And they said, no. And I said, well, you should. And they said, was that weird if I asked them? Isn't that like cheating or something like that? I'm like, no, absolutely not. So if you're interviewing for Google or Meta or Netflix or any of these big top companies, they'll tell you exactly what to study for. They'll even let you do a mock interview a lot of times with an engineer. They'll let you they'll give you all sorts of information because they want you to win the game. Ultimately, they're like, we're spending a lot of money interviewing you, right? Like, this is not free. This is not some game to us. This is money on the line. We want to make sure you're here to win, right? Because what's the use of doing a bunch of interviews if all the people fail? So no, you should ask, what kind of interview will this be? How can I best prepare? I want to know, will this be technical, behavioral? If it is a technical interview, will this be more data structures and algorithms or practical exercise? And they should tell you this information. If they say, oh, we don't actually give out any information at all, and just come here completely blindfolded, I don't know, we'll figure it out then. 1, that's a terrible sign, right? It's a big red flag. 2, it is what it is. You go in there, you study some JS trivia, you go to parsity.io, you grab the free resources there, you look at the Ultimate JS Guide, and you look at what are some common JavaScript questions you could get, and you wish for the best. Ideally, they say, oh, this is actually going to be a practical exercise using vanilla JavaScript. That gives you a very solid clue of what to study. Way better than just going in blindfolded. So once they tell you what this interview is going to be about, now it's up to you to study this, look on Glassdoor to see if you can look at other recent interviews from that same company and see if you can see like a pattern. Maybe somebody said, oh, I got tested on this React concept. Another person says the same thing. Well, now you can, assume that maybe you will be tested on this same concept as well. Great way to quote unquote hack the interview going on there. If you can't do that, if the company's really small and they give you some information, that's okay. Just run with that. One of the most common interview formats for junior developers is to build a small React component in front of me. It fetches some data and displays that data on the screen. Another one could be building something with vanilla JavaScript and HTML. Often will take the same format. Like, build me a small pagination component, using some HTML where you click a button and it scrolls through a list of 5 items. Format a phone number. These kind of somewhat simple, somewhat trivial JavaScript challenges. But I'd say by far and away the most common one is the React one, which I just went over, and also, by the way, is on the parsity.io website. In the Ultimate JS Guide walks you through that exact same problem. And it's the problem that also is in the video that me and Dickie, the guy that volunteered to be in the video, that's the one we walked through because it is by far and away the most common. And people fail it all the time. The reason why they fail it is not because, by the way, they suck at React or JavaScript. It's because they often aren't prepared when they get there. I've had this happen. You go to the interview and they quickly say, "Hey, nice to know you. We have an hour. We're gonna build something." You think there might be some nice get to know you beforehand, or they're gonna, talk for a while. You need to watch that clock because you have 1 hour to build something typically in front of somebody, which is already nerve-wracking. You're going to be using a coding environment that you're not used to. And you should ask that as well. You say, should I have my own coding environment set up? Should I not? Make sure you have tools like Copilot or any AI tools turned off. You should ask them if it's okay to look up things while you're doing it. Remember, there's a clock going on here. So you have this game of beating the clock and also answering the question correctly. Now, during the interview, when you're answering these questions, you should be teaching the other person. And you may be thinking, what the hell can I teach this person? They're like a senior developer at some company I've ever worked at. And here I am, some junior, or, I barely know how to code. Maybe you're saying. First of all, you can always teach somebody something. Second of all, the intention is not to actually teach them. It's to share your own knowledge so you can display that you know more than the average person. What some people do is they clam up, they get really quiet, they don't say a word while they're writing the code. That is as big of a red flag as writing all the wrong code. So if somebody came in there and they didn't know how to use a for loop, that's bad, right? That's not going to get you very far. Now, if somebody came in there and did the whole problem and didn't say a single word, also kind of weird. Writing code is a team sport, and you want to be able to communicate with humans because that's what you often do in, first of all, the corporate world, and as a developer. We are teammates. You're on a team of developers doing team-like stuff. The whole idea of the coding robot sitting in a corner somewhere just doesn't really exist anymore, especially at smaller companies. So that is how you beat that interview. You go in there, you speak about what you're doing. You're saying, here, I'm doing this because I know that I'm using use effect because I only want this to run once during this component when it mounts. And then I want to do an API call. I know it's asynchronous, so I want to do X. You're going through your thought process here. Get as detailed or not. Maybe if you don't know something really well, stay away from it. And if you get really stuck on something silly like slice versus splice, or, some method that you don't often use, like, I kind of forget how to use the window.fetch method. Say, can I just look that up real quick? And they might be, oh yeah, sure. Most developers are going to be cool about that. Now, if they're not cool at all about that, it's a sign to me. It means that, well, do you really know this by heart? It doesn't really matter. Now, if you have to look up something like a for loop, I'd say that is a red flag too, because that is very, very basic JavaScript that you ultimately should have memorized by this time. So now that you've done the tech interview, you've passed that ideally. If you haven't passed it, always ask for feedback. And if you failed it, game's not over yet. Game is not over yet. What I want you to do, I want you to correct the problem or find a solution and then email them immediately as soon as you can saying, hey, I'm really sorry. My nerves got the best of me. I didn't do as well as I could have, but here's the solution I crafted immediately after we hung up our call. Now be truthful about it. Don't go to ChatGPT and build something lame or, do something nefarious, or don't try to cover up, that you couldn't figure out. But if you could figure it out and you do have a solution, send it to them and say, here's what I could have built. I'm sorry, I had some bad nerves, and that's totally fair. They'll read that. I've often seen people do the rebound from that. They get like, somebody sees it and says, oh, you know what? It's a pretty good solution. I appreciate them reaching out. I like this person. Let's bring him in. Let's get him to the next round. Next round being behavioral. Could be another tech screen, but it's often a behavioral. This behavioral one can be a mix. Sometimes the behavioral one is mixed in with the tech interview. Sometimes it's before the tech interview. Here are the questions that you get, and here's how people fail them. Tell me about a time when you had a conflict with a coworker. Tell me about a time when you had to juggle a tight deadline. Tell me about a time when, there's a few variations of this question that are so common in literally every single industry that you just need to have this written down. Just have the story already ready. Because why? Why freestyle it? Why sit there freaking out? You drank 2 cups of coffee. You're sitting there jittering. Your heart's beating 1,000 miles per hour. And now you got to freestyle a story about a time when you did something? No, of course not. You need to think about this beforehand before you get there. That way, when you're there, you're ready to go. Here's my favorite question. Tell me about a technical project you worked on and what you learned on it. There's a variation of that question, but it's always like, tell me about something technical you did. And what junior people or even seniors, or what I used to do is I would just tell, I built this thing using this technology. And that was kind of it. And that's not an interesting or cool story. A cool story is I built this thing using this technology, which led to Now, the best story is I built this thing using this technology, but I messed up, or but there was some issue. Here's how I corrected it. And here was the outcome of me correcting it. And here's what I would have done differently next time. That shows a good story arc. Like, here's the thing. Oh, drama happens. Something bad happens. Here's how I became the hero of the story. Here's what I learned from doing it. So now I'm even wiser now from this story. And here's how I would never get in that situation ever again. The person listening to it's going to be like, oh, they get it. They understand this life cycle of software that we all go through. We've all done this. We've all had some big blow up that we had to fix or that we learned from. And now we've had to document what we've learned from it. We have postmortems and discussions as a team. So this puts you in that same position. It makes them look at you like a peer. Now, if you went to a boot camp, that's fine because you actually probably have stories like that. You can tell them about the time, well, I was learning Next.js in a React project, and I didn't quite get how routing works. So when I deployed it, I thought the page would go here, but it didn't. And when I looked under the hood and read the documentation, I found that routing actually depends on naming conventions, and I wasn't used to that. So what I did is I went back and changed that. I redeployed it, tested all the different routes, and then I built a end-to-end unit test that would test that for me. So that way, every single time I deploy, I never have to worry about that ever again. Now that is a cool story. It was actually a pretty mundane problem, but the way they solved it was cool. And now you can kind of think about this as you're building stuff and thinking, can I make a story around this? Is there a story that's here? And I'm in charge of what I'm building, right? Like if you're on a solo journey as either to coding boot camp or learning on your own or whatever, you can begin building with that in mind, right? Last thing they're going to ask, any questions for me? Some people say, nope. Or way worse, some people say, how much vacation time do I get? When do bonuses happen? What's the starting pay? What's the average pay? Awful, awful questions. And I've heard them too, which when people actually ask that, it's kind of funny almost. I'm like, damn, haven't you like read anything on LinkedIn or anything? So don't ask that, obviously. What you should ask is, tell me about something you would change if you were in charge here. It's a great question to ask. It tells you about the company, lets you know about what they value, what maybe they don't. Maybe it raises some red flags. Another good one would be, tell me about one of the biggest mistakes you made here and what did you learn from it? That puts them in the hot seat a bit, also puts you in more of a peer type of relationship and allows them to be vulnerable too. You've just been very vulnerable. Why not make them a bit vulnerable? You could ask what the onboarding is like. I like more of these emotional questions because it makes a connection with the interviewer. And I'm kind of into that whole, I don't want to say mind game, but I definitely do want to say, hey, you've just grilled me for a long time. I want to hear what you're about too. I want to know you a bit as a person. What's some mistakes you've made here? What's some things you would change? What's the thing you like the most about working here? What's the thing you would like least about working here? Would you recommend a family member to work here? I mean, these leads to interesting conversations. A very safe conversation could be, can you tell me about the deployment process here? How do you deploy code? How do you test code? What do you feel about these processes? These can illuminate all sorts of things about the company. Say, oh, well, we deploy once every 3 months and it takes a week and we have to stay up until midnight. And you might, oof, oh, never mind. I don't want that job. Keep that one, bucko. But anyway, you want to have something interesting to ask at the end. And remember, there's going to be very little time at the end of most of these interviews. They're typically like, we want to see, are you technical? Are you not crazy? Cool. Boom. These questions can make or break the interview though, because if you came off all right and you have great questions at the end, it could mean the difference between a maybe and a yes. If you were not so great, it can mean the difference between a maybe and a no. Okay, now you're done. You're done with it all. You passed the gauntlet. By the way, I should mention nowadays, there's like 4 to 5 rounds at some of these companies. It's wild how long these interviews have gotten, but I think that's because more companies are nervous about making the wrong decisions. And so they don't trust themselves. And as a result, they ask a million questions and want to do a million rounds of interviews. That's just the way it goes. And people think this is just in tech. I'm talking to my son who's out looking for a job. I'm talking to other younger people out there looking for like minimum wage jobs, summer jobs. They're having some of the same issues. To get into Jack in the Box or McDonald's is now taking multiple rounds of interviews. So don't fool yourself thinking that a developer job is going to come fall in your lap. This is a job where the entry-level salary is often 6 figures for a junior developer. So of course the bar is going to be raised. Don't let that scare you. Also, don't let it scare you from making a counter offer. This is important. If you're going to skip anything, please don't skip this. When they make you an offer at the end of this, say, you know what? We like you. We like you, Jimmy. We like you, Sarah. We want to give you $62,000. And you look them dead in the eye and say, that's great. Do you mind if I take some time to think about it? They should absolutely say yes. They'll often give you a timeline for how long you can. And what you need to do is to go back home and think, I need to ask for more. And how much more? Don't be ridiculous, of course, or get ridiculous as you want. I've heard of one incident over, I don't know, too many to count, of one person getting an offer revoked from asking for way too much. And it was like a silly amount more. It wasn't like anything normal, right? If they said 62,000 and you said, well, I want 120,000, they might say, okay, look, thanks for wasting our time. We don't have that much. We told you from the start, this is what we had, don't be silly. But I'd say a safe way to do it is to ask for 10 to 15% more, but don't just ask for it. Don't say, I want this much. Say, after doing some research, I really feel like this is more in line with what the market is offering, especially for this role in this market. And I'd like to move closer to this range. How can we get there? Because I really like the company. You always start off with, first, I'm super excited to work here. Thank you so much for this opportunity and the offer. I would love to move forward. I'm hoping we can get closer to this number as it's more in line with whatever reasons. Do you have to give some concrete reasons? No, you don't. You don't need to give them a laundry list like, well, I went to this website and it told me that this is it. You can just say, I'm really hoping to get more here. I'm excited to work here. What's it going to take to get us there? And then they say, we can't do that. So that's fine. Is there any way to me to get a sign-on bonus? And when can I get a review on my salary? That's fair too. So, and then if you can't negotiate that, say, you know what? I understand times are tough. Now, understand this. I need to work from home 3 days a week. Can we work that out? Understand this. I need to commute during these hours because it's really difficult for me to come in this time. I can work from home and do my hours here, but there's no way I can be here at these different times. Is there any wiggle room on that? There's always room to negotiate somewhere. Sign-on bonus is one. Getting the salary initially higher is the best one you can do. Say, I want to stay here for a long time. I want to make sure my salary's in line so I don't need to look around later. I mean, don't tell them that. But you want to make sure your salary's in the correct place. And you may be thinking, but I only have one offer. Well, can I even negotiate? I worked with a guy that had that exact problem. He was out of work for 6 months, finally got an offer. I said, cool, man, now time to negotiate. He's like, wait, what? I'm like, yeah, dude, we're going to negotiate. We did. We got him $13,000 extra. If you're not negotiating, you're losing money. Don't overthink it. Use that script. And that's it, my friends. That is your junior developer interview. If that sounds intimidating and scary, yeah, it's a bit. No one likes to interview, right? That's why we do it once every 2 to 3 to 5 years. Then we don't do it for a long time. So my kind of hot take, my not so fun advice is to interview every 6 months. That way you know if you're overpaid, underpaid, indifferent. And you have the power to interview at any time you want. So that way you're not at the mercy of somebody else. Go to Parsity.io, grab the freaking Ultimate JS Guide, join us at Parsity and get a discount this week if you move fast. Can't wait to see you in there, or if not, maybe I'll just see you in the newsletter around the show. See ya. That'll do it for today's episode of the Develop Yourself podcast. To learn more about becoming a software engineer with us, then check out Parsity.io. If you're not quite ready for that, then jump into our Dev30.xyz program, which is 30 days of working on your mindset, habits, and JavaScript skills. Totally worth it. See you next week.